What if pain isn't the problem, but actually the pathway back to you? You're listening to The Leadership Wound, From Pain to Permission. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. This is where we get honest about the real cost of leadership, the burnout, the pretending, the rejection, and the return to your authentic self. Because this isn't about performance, it's about permission. Welcome to the leader you've always been. Acceptance opens the door to healing because it invites us to face with honesty where we really are. It helps us to shift our focus away from what caused the pain, whether that was a person, an organization, or a situation, and shifts us towards what we can actually control now, which is how we respond, how we process it, and how we move forward. Welcome back to The Leadership Wound. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and guide. And if you've been following along, you know we are right in the middle of a podcast series called The Healing Work of Leadership. It's rooted in a deeply personal healing journey that I've gone through, and also a mission that God has placed on my heart. And that is to help leaders like you, leaders who are weary from performing and pretending, who feel disconnected or disillusioned by what leadership has demanded of them, and they're ready to stop. They're ready to finally name their wounds, the ones they carry, to feel them fully, and to begin the slow but sacred work of healing. So far in this series, we've walked through the first two movements. The first was feeling the wound, daring to face the pain instead of running from it or numbing it away. The second is naming the wound, giving language to our experience, and breaking isolation. And today we're moving to the next stage, which is accepting the wound. This is often the hardest and most misunderstood step because leaders often get confused about what acceptance means. Acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance does not mean you're okay with what had happened. Acceptance does not mean you have to stay in your pain. But without acceptance, healing can't take root. So let's today explore together why this stage matters so deeply and what beauty it unlocks when we allow ourselves to stop resisting it. So often in our pain, our instinct is to either run from the pain or to move too quickly to fix it, so we just don't have to sit in the discomfort of it. But why do we do this? Many of us consciously or unconsciously have bought into the belief that if we are living faithfully, if we're following Jesus, then we shouldn't suffer. And therefore, suffering feels foreign. It feels wrong. And so when pain inevitably comes, because we all know if we're human, the pain will come, we're not immune to it, we feel confused by it. We wonder, what did I do wrong? Is my faith not strong enough? Did I miss something in leader training? I thought everyone was supposed to love every decision I made or every direction I wanted to go. But here's the truth. There is a theology of suffering. Jesus himself said plainly, in this world you will have trouble. Not if, but when. God does not cause our suffering, though. We do fine on our own as humans to cause our own pain and inflict it on others. But he does allow it. And more than that, he uses it. Remember what we said the other week, the wound is where the light comes in. If we can begin to develop a theology of suffering, to see that pain is part of this side of heaven, it changes everything. It allows us to stop seeing all pain as personal failure. Remember, everything that happens to us is not about us. Contrary to what we may think, the world does not revolve around us, and that includes our suffering. Of course, some pain is caused by our poor choices, but some is the result of others because they too have free will. They have autonomy over their own decisions, and God does not intervene to stop every choice they make. We'll talk more about this later in this episode. But when we know that suffering will be a part of our life and that it is not always our fault, we don't have to panic or rush through it. That sort of mental shift can be a game changer in how we process and move through our pain. If we believe our pain can serve a purpose, we're more willing to stay in it till it accomplishes its purpose. If we believe our pain can serve a purpose, we're more willing to hold space for it so it can teach us valuable lessons. And we are more willing to let it work in us, as the scriptures say, to accomplish God's perfect will. God does not cause our pain, but He does use it. But if you're a human and honest, you have probably avoided or rushed through your pain. Can you think of a time when you did either of those things simply because it felt too uncomfortable to sit in it, to hold it? I know I have. Early on in my leadership, I just didn't have the capacity to hold the pressure. When I experienced my first deep leadership wound, I didn't yet have this kind of framework to help me work through it. I was also naive. I idealized my leaders, believing surely leaders in the church, those who love and serve God, would never harm or betray their oath. But I forgot something critical. They were human, just like me. Not perfect, not above failure, and not worthy of being placed on a pedestal, because there's only one leader who deserves that spot. And so when the wound came, it shattered not only my trust, but my assumptions about leadership. And I didn't want to believe that the leaders who were charged with authority over me, the ones meant to pour into young leaders, could be capable of doing harm. I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. And so I denied it. When we experience our leadership wounds at the hands of others, we can make all kinds of excuses for them, saying things like, they're just stressed. They don't really mean it that way. Maybe it's me and I'm just too sensitive. They have a lot on their plate right now. They have things going on outside of work that are affecting their ability to lead. I probably was the one who misunderstood. Or that's just how ministry works sometimes. They're older and wiser. Maybe I just need to trust them. Or if I was stronger, this wouldn't bother me so much. I wish I wasn't so sensitive. Or everyone else seems fine with it, so maybe it's just me. And on it could go, the excuses that we make when we know deep down inside something is just not right. We tend to rewrite the narrative so that we don't have to face the truth that feels unbearable. Facing the idea that people you trust, people who carry spiritual responsibility, can also carry unresolved brokenness and act out of it, can often feel too heavy to carry. And if we don't carry a robust understanding about humanity and the frailty of all of us, about the suffering this side of heaven, we will continue to deny and make excuses for others, rather than accept what is really going on. For a time, denial may seem safer. Excusing it may feel easier. But what I don't think we count on is that denial doesn't make the wound go away. It just delays the healing process. But acceptance invites us into something deeper. It reminds us, they are human, and so am I. It creates space to begin healing from it. It does not excuse it, but it does recognize our humanity. It does allow others to be human too, to make mistakes, to hurt us, to fail us. And it does surrender control, rather than at all costs trying to shelter ourselves from pain. Sometimes we get so tripped up or fixated on what should have happened that we never enter into the grieving phase of our pain. We get stuck in the quote-unquote should have been phase when no one gets hurt and people always do what they should do. And this is especially hard because what should have been is supposedly good, right, and ideal. Maybe the leader should have been healthier. Maybe the organization should have had integrity and known what was really going on. And maybe the relationship should have been safer. And while we may be 100% right about all of these should-haves, it didn't happen. And sadly, nothing can make us go back in time to fix it. And people will continue to be people and continue to do things that we don't like or shouldn't do. Staying fixated on what should have been doesn't heal us. It keeps us stuck in cycles of frustration, gossip, and endless emotional energy trying to rewrite the past when there is only one person that can rightfully control what happens next, and that is us. Acceptance opens the door to healing because it invites us to face, with honesty, where we really are. It helps us to shift our focus away from what caused the pain, whether that was a person, an organization, or a situation, and shifts us towards what we can actually control now, which is how we respond, how we process it, and how we move forward. It's a shift from staying fixated on the source of our wound and onto moving through the pain to the other side, to the healing from our wound. I've sadly seen leaders stay captured in their own pain because they were unwilling to let go of the source of their pain, and therefore they were unable to move beyond a victim mindset. Acceptance moves us from a victim mindset where life only happens to us to an empowered mindset where healing and growth begin to happen within us. And it's important to note at this point that acceptance and grieving what is does not mean excusing wrong behavior. It does not mean failing to hold appropriate boundaries or responsibilities, because there is a time for naming harm and assigning accountability. But acceptance does invite us beyond the endless rehashing of what did or didn't happen and brings us into the reality of what is. Because when we refuse to make that shift, we stay in a subtle form of denial. And denial, though it feels protective, actually blocks true healing. Let's take a moment to pause and reflect so all of this just isn't cerebral, but moves throughout our whole body. Where in your life or leadership are you still caught in grieving what should have been, or constantly rehashing, draining yourself in the process, instead of beginning to release and grieve what actually is? You can't move forward with a wound you pretend isn't there, that you don't take time to feel, that you don't name, and that you continue to wish had never happened. But once you acknowledge its presence and allow yourself to actually call it by name and feel it, something profound happens. So where are you still caught in the grieving? Where might you give yourself permission to no longer allow the wound to define you? Where do you need freedom to no longer be the victim of what happened to you? And where now can what was a source of harm now be a teacher and become part of your wisdom? If you've ever wondered, is my leadership wound still open, or has it become a scar that now tells a story? Here's how you can tell the difference. Wounds are still open. They bleed, they ache. They easily get infected when touched. But scars remind us that healing has taken place. They carry the memory, but they are no longer tender to the touch. They don't carry the same sting, but they do carry a story. And let's be clear, having scars does not mean someone or something won. Scars do not validate the wound, they validate your healing. They are not proof that pain defeated you, they are proof that you made it through. Jesus' scars didn't validate that the enemy had power, they validated that the true power resided in a God who would bear the sins of the world, go down to the pit of hell for the people he loved, and come up victorious. Jesus was down for the count, But his time wasn't wasted in defeat. From those last breaths of, "Into your hands I commit myself," till he was seen walking around resurrection morning. He wasn't in defeat. He was feeling every wound humanity could inflict on him. He was naming every sin known to man. And he was accepting the weight of death times infinity for every human ever born and every human to be born. Make no mistakes about it, my Jesus didn't spend any time casting blame or judgment on those who put him on the cross. In fact, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they have done." He grieved the sins of the world. He accepted the frailty of humanity and went about the business of doing only what he could do and only what he could control. And that was defeating death. His wounds were real, but so were his scars. And his scars continue to tell the story of how much he loves us and how far he would go for us. I can remember when my kids were young, one day on our family vacation to the beach, I had cut my hand badly slicing a watermelon. I ended up in the ER and needed stitches. It completely changed the rest of our vacation. I couldn't swim or get my hand wet. I had to keep my hand dry, out of the water, and away from germs. In many ways, it took the joy out of the vacation for me because I loved getting in the water and playing with the kids. But I knew I needed to follow the doctor's wisdom. So I accepted my limitations. I stayed out of the fun for a little while and watched from the sidelines. I tended my wound every day by changing the dressings, putting on the ointments, and watching for signs of infection and keeping it dry. Not an easy task with 3 young children at the beach, but I honored the healing process, and the wound eventually closed. Now I have a scar, nothing comparable to the scars of Jesus, but I do have a scar on my hand. It doesn't ache anymore. It doesn't limit me. But it does remind me and my kids who still remember that day of what happened and how not to cut a watermelon. When we allow ourselves to accept and process our wounds, they slowly become scars. We're able to retell the story, and rather than being a victim, we're now the victor. They transform our pain into permission to use all of life as a source of wisdom, compassion for ourselves and others, and the ability to teach us to embody our leadership authentically. Our scars allow us to move from "this happened to me" to "this shaped me." And that is building the capacity to hold our suffering and accept the pain that life brings our way. It means embracing a difficult but liberating truth. Authentic living and leading will always involve risk. To love people is to risk being hurt. To be vulnerable is to risk being misunderstood. To lead with wholeness and authenticity is to risk people not following. To release others to make their own choices is to risk them choosing poorly. But here's the deeper truth. Living without risk isn't living at all. If we spend our energy avoiding pain and minimizing our risks, we may protect ourselves, but we also miss out on the richness, the beauty, and the depth that life has to offer us. And so it may seem counterintuitive, but the more we love, the more we're vulnerable, the more we lead with authenticity and give back autonomy to people. Essentially, the more we risk and the more we grow our capacity. Your wounds can show you where you're growing in your capacity. Don't shy away from them. Let them lead you into authenticity. Let me ask you a couple questions. Where have you been avoiding risk out of fear of pain? What might open up if you trusted your wounds, though hard, as being a part of your journey and not the end of it? You may be wondering, so why does acceptance matter so much? Beyond simply building our capacity to hold the pain, And that is because acceptance releases resentment. It opens our hearts again to receive love. It restores our ability to move forward creatively and wisely. And it turns wounds, once sources of shame and pain, into wells of wisdom. Acceptance allows us to keep on living and keep on loving others. Acceptance is what allows us to grieve without getting stuck, forgive without excusing, risk without becoming reckless, and love again even after being hurt. What beauty might await us on the other side of our acceptance? Acceptance is an invitation, and it's a gift. It's not an easy gift, but one that honors our humanity and the humanity of others. And most importantly, it honors the God who gave us free will, knowing that love always comes with risk. Wherever you are today in your leadership or life journey, if you're carrying pain, whether that's fresh or maybe long buried, I want to invite you into acceptance. Not a resignation, but a recognition. Because the wounds you carry do not have to define you. They don't have to continue shaping how you live and lead. But they do need to be honored. They do need to be felt, and they do need to be named. And yes, accepted. And if you need someone to walk alongside of you on that path, I'd be honored. I've helped many leaders step into healing one step at a time. You'll find a link in the show notes to begin that journey with me. This could be your next step towards healing your leadership wound. But remember, acceptance isn't the final destination. Saying this happened, this shaped me, this is real, is only part of the healing journey. Acceptance frees you from denial and shame, but it won't automatically build your energy or restore your emotional resilience or create healthy rhythms for living and leading. That's where the next step comes in, tending the wound. And in our next episode, part 4 and the last installment of the Leadership Wound Healing Path, we'll talk about what it looks like to move from acceptance into action. Not rushing to fix, but intentionally nurturing the wounded places in you with compassion and care. Because true leadership doesn't just accept the wound, it learns to tend it, so you can lead from strength, clarity, and wholeness. Join me in the next episode where we'll share what it really looks like to tend your leadership wounds in a practical, embodied, and sustainable way. Thanks for tuning in to The Leadership Wound. If this episode spoke to you, would you leave a review? Your words could help other wounded leaders find their way back to healing as well. And if you're ready to stop performing and start leading authentically, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and at my website, authenticallyyou.org, for more inspiration and free resources. Until next time, lead like you.